This is the Pecron E1000 LFP portable power station, and it is aggressively priced below the competition. But being cheap is not its most significant feature. The E1000 LFP features a self-heating function. It does take a little bit of power from, for example, your solar panels or your wall outlet to reheat the battery from a completely frozen state of charge. This is particularly helpful in those off-grid environments where you're not heating a space, but you do need access to that power. This Pecron system could be perfect for those scenarios. And there are quite literally no other 1 kilowatt hour batteries that offer self-heating or the ability to recharge at all in sub-freezing temperatures. Before we go too much further, I did want to let you know that Pecron sent this E1000 LFP for a test and review. They didn't pay me to say anything in this video, and they have no control over the content. On my scale, it weighs in at 30 pounds and 3 ounces. It measures 10 inches tall, 14.9 inches wide, and 9.4 inches deep. And those weights and measurements put the E1000 right in the sweet spot for the 1024 watt-hour capacity range of portable power station. And that just over 1 kilowatt hour of battery power is, of course, lithium iron phosphate. The E1000's design is very reasonable with all of its inputs and outputs on the front and on this passenger side. That makes the E1000 perfect for storing flush up against a wall while allowing room on the sides for air to flow through these 4 vents. The battery inside the E1000 is rated to have 3,500 complete cycles with an 80% state of charge remaining at the end of those cycles. It does have expandability up to 4,096 watt hours, making this a great entry portable power station, which can get expanded as your needs grow. This system can be charged by 2 methods, and the first one is this XT60 input, which has a limiter for 8 amps or 20 amps. If you're using this in your vehicle or your car charging outlet, you want to make sure that you do select that 8 amp input. Otherwise, if you're using a solar panel array, this thing will accept between 11 and 60 volts with a 600 watt maximum input. And if you, of course, do not have solar panels, it does have a standard wall input, which is rated for 100 to 120 volts and 1000 watts max. It does have a little reset switch built in if you happen to exceed that maximum. And a lot of power stations recently do have a grounding screw, meaning that you can improve this power station's grounding safety in some more permanent setups with this grounding screw. The entire front of the E1000 does have these little rubber covers for all of the outlets. However, if you really want to improve that water resistance, you do have to make sure that when you are not using these outlets, you cover them back up and seal them. It does say in the instructions to store in a cool, dry place. And based on the looks of the vents on both sides of it, I would imagine you do not want to get this wet at all or carry it in places where you're exposed to a lot of dust. The E1000 is packed with all the features that you need and none of the features that you don't. Starting off with the AC inverter, which has 5 outlets and is rated to sustain 1800 watts max combined from the 5. Moving over, we do have 2 100 watt USB-Cs. I have seen some newer power stations with 140 watts, but 100 watts is still pretty sufficient. And we have not given up on these dinosaur USB-As yet, rated at 18 watts. This is something interesting, which I really like to see for these more off-grid van lifestyle uses, which is this 20 amp XT60 output. Several of the devices that I run in my minivan camper use a XT60, and so this is a great addition for a truly portable power station. We do, of course, have our traditional car style outlet rated at 10 amps or 120 watts, and we have not given up on this 5521 barrel plug, although there is only one rated at 5 amps or about 60 watts. One of the most significant upgrades with the E1000 is this display. The display itself isn't necessarily any better. It does look brighter, it's much easier to read, but the information displayed is pretty substantial. Currently, we're showing the battery's voltage, which is 52.6 volts for the internal battery. That also means that no matter what you use, the DC outputs or the AC outputs, there is some voltage change occurring within the power station. It shows you the input wattage, which would display right here, the output wattage, an array of other things that we'll discover in testing. But overall, I'm very satisfied with this new display. And something I really like about the new E1000 LFP over any other previous Pecron model is that if I hold this power button, you can see that the unit has deliberately shut down and everything is turned off. Turning everything off with one deliberate move is extremely helpful, especially for conditions where I use these power stations where I like it so that if it's on, it stays on and doesn't shut off, or if it's off, I want to make sure that it's off. Charging this power station from a wall outlet can be accomplished in as little as 1 hour and 18 minutes. You can achieve an 80% state of charge in just about an hour. So if you are in a rush to get to your destination, charging a power station like this won't take several hours like it has in the past. Now let's get into some testing. The first test I want to do with this power station is, of course, see if it can brew my cup of coffee. I'm not going to waste a K-cup for this test, but one of the things that I like to find out is if I need to, can I brew a cup of coffee? And so what I'm going to do is hit start and hit brew at the same time. And within about 35 seconds of initiating the process, I've bumped up to this 1400 watts. This power station should be able to handle the 1400 watts indefinitely throughout the entire battery capacity. I started with about 56%, and it's saying I can run this for about 18 minutes. What I'll do in a few minutes here is spike the AC outlet to see how close I can get to that 1800 watts and if I can run anything for just a little higher load than that 1800 watts. So just about 2 minutes into the process, I've stopped heating. I've achieved that cup of coffee. The rest of the power being drawn, as you can see, is minimal from the power station. Brewing 1 cup of coffee with this power station cost me between 4 and 5% of the battery life. So I could brew anywhere from 16 to 20 cups of coffee with a complete state of charge. And for the next test, I want to get this thing as close to 1800 watts as possible and run it for a hot soak to see if this thing can handle running that maximum load for 10 minutes. We're just about 6 minutes into this test. This thing is performing as expected. I can feel just a little bit of heat coming out of the side of the power station, but I'm only down to about 30% of its battery life. I only have 3 to 8 minutes of power remaining, so I may not be able to make it to the end of this test, but wherever I run out of power, if I hit that 10-minute mark, perfect. Otherwise, right now, it feels like we're not having any problem sustaining that maximum 1800 watt load for an extended period. And we just hit 10 minutes at 1800 watts, no problem. I'm actually gonna go ahead and allow the power station to run itself empty so we can see if we can hit that 1.3 hours of recharge time from a 0% state of charge. Before I run the battery too low, I do want to turn on my decibel meter, see how much noise I'm getting just from the fans with the AC inverter and power station in the off position. So something I find a bit surprising is that although I have shut everything off on the power station, I would have expected to hear those fans continue to run, but the fans have completely turned off, and I'm not sure if that's an issue or not, but I was running this thing, it is heat soaked at its maximum load for about 12 minutes before I shut it off. The fans are completely off. I'm curious if I do turn it on, will the fans cut back on even though the AC inverter is not on? So 12% state of charge, just completed the heat soak test. The AC inverter is not on. Let me just turn that on and see if that'll trigger. The AC inverter's on and this thing just started cooling itself off again. So for me, that is some surprising heat management. The AC inverter's on. We're still maybe a minute or two away from that heat soak test. The fans are only on with the AC inverter on. If I turn it off, let me just check that one more time. As soon as I turn off that AC inverter, those fans do shut off. For a lot of my uses, I turn on that inverter, I do the high load event that I need to do with it, and then I immediately shut it off to conserve power. I'm not sure if heat management is separate from the AC inverter completely, or if this thing is at a state of heat that it feels like it is safe for it to cool off naturally without any additional power consumption. For the next two tests, I started by completely draining the battery. Then I topped it off. I achieved an 80% state of charge in 52 minutes and 100% in 1 hour and 25 minutes. Once it was completely full, I started a battery capacity rundown test using the small MyHeat heater. I achieved 914 watt hours at a 0.2 C load for an impressive 89% return on battery capacity. You may be wondering, where is that power station right now? And I have it in a deep freezer, so I can achieve a completely frozen state with that portable power station, and then we can test and see how does that self-heating function perform. After several hours in the freezer, this thing is absolutely ice cold. And before it gets defrosted, I want to go ahead and plug it in and see what happens. This is the test that I've looked forward to the most with this Pecron E1000 LFP. I should have attached the app to see exactly what the internal temperature is, and so I'm going to try to do that here in a few minutes. Of course, since it's plugged in, oh wow, it shows an input of 100, 300. What is this thing doing? One, I hope that it is not damaging itself. I hope that that power, that 1000 watts, is truly going into reheating that battery. But to me, it's absolutely insane that I can even plug this thing in and it doesn't immediately tell me that it's not going to work. Let's get the app hooked up and see if it will tell me the internal temperature of the battery. To enter pairing, I'm going to hold both the DC and AC buttons simultaneously, and there they are. You can just barely see them under that display, and this thing is so cold, it's just crazy. So I'm gonna go ahead and pair that. Let's hit that plus button. To successfully bind the power station, I did have to use my 2.4 gigahertz network. Power station will not bind on the 5 gigahertz network. So right now it shows I'm at 28% with an insanely quick recharge time of 20 minutes remaining. But one thing I really want to point out is the internal temperature right now shows 8 degrees Celsius. So this thing has been increasing for the last 10 minutes or so pretty quickly. And I suspect that at a certain point, it will actually reset and top off. The only thing that kind of surprises me right now, I am not sure what this percentage means. It shows almost 20% on the device, but it has only been plugged in for just a few minutes, and so I don't know if it's 20% closer to being warmed enough to actually charge. I'm not exactly sure what is going on inside of the power station, but it is definitely not at 20% already. I've been putting in about 1000 watts. 1000 watts of heat is a lot of heat, so that could be heating up those batteries much quicker than I expect. Whatever this thing is doing, it does seem to at least be heating up. Now, I have had some batteries in the past, not portable power stations, but standalone, for example, 12 and 24 volt batteries that have a self-heating function. Most of the time, they do have a little bit of trouble with the temperature reading correctly, but what I'm confident of is that the battery itself is heating up. It's using, yes, it's using quite a bit of power, but for me, in a colder or severe cold weather climate, using power to recharge the battery so that I could then actually get the battery to take a charge, much better than having a dead weight that is essentially useless for most of the winter. One thing I should have done from the beginning here would have been to hook up a watt meter. That way I could see exactly how much power it takes to heat up from the lowest temperature to a reasonable charging temperature. And then I could guess, based on my solar panel array, how much of that solar panel capability would go into recharging this battery. But nonetheless, the other reason that I'm excited to be able to even do this is, one, the power that it's using right now is coming from the wall. So if I unplug it, it will stop heating itself. So it will only attempt to heat itself when it is getting some kind of external power, meaning that you will not waste the internal battery storage on heating if you don't have the ability to recharge. That's another pro with that system. And surprisingly, the main concern that I have with the self-heating function right now is that the battery shunt is showing 45%. Again, I am not sure why it is showing that, but I know for a fact that the battery is or started close to zero and it is definitely not at 40% or 45% state of charge. So I do want to allow this thing to go through its process, and then in an hour or so I'll check back in and see, did it actually top itself off, and if it topped itself off, does the shunt show correctly 100%? Also, I will be checking if during this process at some point it drops back down to zero and then charges from zero, because it was at a 0% state of charge when I first started this test. So we did achieve that 100% down here, but as you can see, we're still bringing in almost 600 watts, or just about 600 watts. The power station itself has warmed up. The internal battery temperature is 20 degrees Celsius. I hooked up my small MyHeat heater just to see if I can get that percentage to drop again below 100%. Currently showing a 52.8 volt state of charge in the battery, 20 degrees Celsius. If I recall correctly, this was a 56 volt battery. It is 3.3 volts below its nominal 100% state of charge. So this thing should drop pretty quickly. The MyHeat heater's been hooked up for a few minutes, just dropping the percentage slowly. The battery itself is starting to feel a little warmer. I'm gonna go ahead and top it off, get it charged back off to 100%. I'm not too worried about the display shunt here. The main reason this doesn't concern me is it is at least accepting more power. Those other power stations that do not have self-heating, once they get below that 0 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees Fahrenheit, they do stop charging. In this case, this thing is still performing as it's supposed to. I feel like once it gets topped off, it will correct itself, and then I'll be back in business as usual. And so that leaves that last question that I always want to answer when I review a power station like this. Would I buy it again if I had to? And the answer to that question is, for this particular case, for that self-heating function, for the ability to take it off grid, take it anywhere, let it get frozen, and then bring it back up to its full operating temperature. To me, that is absolutely worth it for a power station that is this cheap as well. There is absolutely no other power station in the 1 kilowatt hour category that has these features. Now, for some of the other categories, such as the AC inverter, there are several in this size that have bigger AC inverters. There's also some that have bigger USB-Cs, better displays, potentially better in every other category. But in this category, for the 1 kilowatt hour, this one hands down is the best bang for the buck. That does it for this review. If you have any questions about this power station, please leave those in the comments below, and I'll catch you in my next video.